The dust storm hit Dust Haven like a hammer made of sand and fury. Roy Davis had seen plenty of them in his 20 years running the repair shop, but this one seemed angrier than most. He was just finishing up a weld on a cargo hauler's landing strut when the whole workshop shook. Not from the wind. Something had just crashed onto his landing pad. Roy killed the welding torch and pushed up his safety goggles. Through the red haze of dust, he could see the outline of a ship. Small. Scout class, maybe. Smoke was pouring from its engines, and the landing had torn up half his pad. He swore under his breath and grabbed his emergency kit. Nobody flew in weather like this unless they were desperate or stupid. The airlock hissed open before he even reached the ship. What came out made Roy stop in his tracks. The alien was massive, easily 8 feet tall, covered in scales that shifted between deep blue and purple. His body looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a warrior from ancient Earth legends, but it was not the size that froze Roy in place. It was the way the creature moved. He was cradling something in his arms, and his whole body shook with what Roy recognized as grief. In the alien's arms lay a female of the same species. Her scales were beautiful, decorated with patterns that glowed faintly, but the light was flickering like a dying bulb. She was not moving. Her chest barely rose and fell. The male alien's eyes locked onto Roy. They were golden, slit like a cat's, and filled with raw desperation. He stumbled forward, and Roy realized the alien was injured too. Dark blood ran down his leg, but he did not seem to notice or care. Help her. The words came out in perfectly understandable English, though the accent was thick and strange. Please help her. Roy held up his hands. Friend, I'm just a mechanic. I fix ships, not people. You need a doctor. The alien took another step closer. Up close, Roy could see the female's scales were not just flickering anymore. They were going dark, spreading from her extremities inward like a wave of death. Whatever was wrong with her, it was getting worse fast. No doctor can help, the alien said. His voice cracked. Cascade syndrome. Always fatal. But you make dead things live again. I have watched humans. You fix what others say cannot be fixed. You must try. I work on engines and electrical systems, Roy protested. I don't know anything about alien biology. The alien reached down with one hand while still holding his mate with the other. He pulled a weapon from his belt, something that looked like a mix between a sword and a gun. Roy tensed, but the alien did not point it at him. Instead, he held it out like an offering. This is a plasma blade, worth more than your entire settlement. Take it, take my ship. Take everything I have. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. Just please try. She is all I have. Roy looked at the weapon, then at the dying female, then at the male alien's face. There was something in those golden eyes that hit Roy right in the chest. It was the same look he had seen in his own mirror 10 years ago, when his wife Linda had been dying of the plague that swept through the outer colonies. The look of someone who would give anything, do anything, if it meant just one more day with the person they loved. He had not been able to save Linda. The plague had taken her despite everything the doctors tried. But this alien was not asking him to cure a plague. He was asking him to try. Just try, bring her inside, Roy said quietly. I can't promise anything. The alien's whole body sagged with relief. I am called Ralthan. She is Shira. We are Draenir. Roy Davis. Let's get her on the exam table. Roy's workshop was not set up for medical work, but he cleared off his main workbench and helped Ralthan lay Shira down as gently as possible. Under the workshop lights, Roy could see her condition more clearly. The dark patches had spread further. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. What happened to her? Roy asked, pulling out his diagnostic scanner. It was meant for checking electrical systems in ships, but energy was energy. Raiders attacked our colony ship, Ralthan said. He stood beside the table, one hand holding Shira's. She fought them while others escaped. Took a plasma blast to the chest. The wound healed, but it triggered the cascade. When a Draenir suffers catastrophic trauma, sometimes the neural network that connects our scales begins to shut down. Once it starts, it cannot be stopped. Roy ran the scanner over Shira's body. The readouts made his eyes widen. Her body was generating a massive bioelectric field, but it was collapsing in on itself. The scanner showed the energy pathways dying one by one, like watching lights go out in a building. How long does she have? Roy asked. Hours, maybe less. Roy stared at the scanner readings. The pattern looked familiar somehow. Not biological, but electrical, like a power grid experiencing a cascade failure. where one node going down overloads the next, which overloads the next, until the whole system crashes. This neural network of yours, Roy said slowly. It is biological, right? But it runs on bioelectricity? Yes, our scales are not just armor. They are part of our nervous system. They process thought, sensation, everything. Roy's mind raced. A living circuit board. That was what she was, and circuit boards he understood. I need information, Roy said. Everything you know about Draenir physiology. How the scales connect, how the energy flows, everything. Ralthan pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic display appeared, showing detailed schematics of Draenir anatomy. Roy studied it intensely, his prosthetic arm whirring softly as he zoomed in on different sections. Your doctors see this as a medical condition, Roy said after several minutes, but I see it as an engineering problem. The energy flow is not stopping because of disease. It is stopping because the pathway is damaged and the system is shutting down to prevent total overload. Our best physicians have studied cascade syndrome for generations, Ralthan said quietly. None have found a cure. That is because they are trying to cure it, Roy said. He looked up at Ralthan with something that might have been hope or might have been madness in his eyes. I am not going to cure her. I am going to reboot her. Before Ralthan could respond, the workshop door banged open. Roy's daughter Lily rushed in, her red hair wild from the wind. She was 16, all elbows and enthusiasm, and she had been helping Roy in the shop since she could hold a wrench. Dad, I saw the crash, are you? She stopped dead when she saw Shira on the table. Holy stars. Lily, I need you to run to Beth's place and get her down here now. Tell her to bring every power cell and energy regulator she has. Dad, what are you doing? Something probably impossible, Roy admitted. Now go, Lily ran. Roy turned back to Shira, whose breathing had gotten even more shallow. Ralthan's hand tightened around hers. If you can truly save her, Ralthan said softly, I will owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Then let us make sure I do not have to collect it, Roy said, rolling up his sleeves. Because I have got no idea if this will work. Beth Williams arrived at the workshop in record time, her tool belt jangling and her arms full of equipment. She was the settlement's electrical engineer, a woman in her 40s who could make power flow through anything. Right behind her came old Walter Hughes, the settlement's only xenobiologist. Moving slower but with sharp eyes that missed nothing, Roy. Lily said you needed help with an alien emergency, Beth said, then stopped when she saw Shira on the table. Sweet mercy. Is she alive? Barely, Roy said. He had spent the last 10 minutes studying the holographic anatomy display Ralthan provided, making notes on an old tablet. Beth, I need you to look at these readings. Tell me if I am seeing what I think I am seeing. Beth set down her equipment and studied the scanner output. Her eyes widened. This is incredible. Her entire body is a living electrical network. The bioelectric potential is off the charts. Was off the charts, Walter corrected, leaning over to examine Shira directly. He had studied Draenir physiology 40 years ago, back when first contact was still new. Look at the cascade pattern. Each scale cluster is a neural node and they are shutting down in sequence. I have read about this condition but never seen it in person. Can it be reversed? Ralthan asked. His voice was tight with controlled desperation. Walter hesitated. Every medical text says no. Once the cascade begins, the neural damage is irreversible. The entire network collapses and the individual dies. But medical texts treat her like a biological system, Roy said. What if we treat her like an electrical system instead? Beth caught on immediately. You want to jumpstart her? Like boosting a dead battery? More than that. Roy pulled up his notes. Look at the pattern of the cascade. It is not random. It follows the natural energy pathways. The system is not failing because it is damaged beyond repair. It is failing because it is trying to protect itself. When one node gets overloaded, it shuts down and transfers the load to the next node, which then overloads and shuts down. Classic cascade failure. So we need to interrupt the cascade, Beth said, nodding slowly. Create a new pathway for the energy to flow. Exactly. If we can bypass the damaged sections and give the bioelectric current a new route, the system might stabilize on its own. Walter shook his head. That is an engineering solution to a biological problem. Her body is not a machine. No, Roy agreed, but it follows the same principles. Energy has to go somewhere. Right now it is destroying her because it has nowhere to go. We give it a path, we might save her. Ralthan looked between them. You said might. What are the risks? Roy met his eyes. Honestly, I could kill her instantly. If we get the power levels wrong or if the pathways cannot handle the load, her entire nervous system could burn out. But if we do nothing, she dies anyway. You said she has hours. I am guessing she has less than that now. As if to confirm his words, more of Shira's scales went dark. The glow that had been slowly fading was now nearly gone. Her breathing turned ragged. Ralthan closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they were filled with resolve. Do it. A quick death trying to live is better than slow death waiting to die. Roy nodded and turned to his team. Beth, I need a modified power cell. Something that can deliver a controlled surge of electricity. Walter, map out the major neural pathways. I need to know where to create the bypass. Lily. His daughter had been standing quietly in the corner, watching everything with wide eyes. Now she stepped forward. I am here, Dad. What do you need? Sterilize every tool we have. And then I need you to help me with the most delicate wiring job we have ever done. For the next hour, the workshop transformed into something between a surgery room and an electronics lab. Beth rigged a power cell from a mining drone, adding regulators and controls to let them adjust the output precisely. Walter used the holographic display to map Shira's neural pathways, identifying the cascade's origin point and the major energy routes. Roy worked on the most important part. Using thin conductive wire normally used for ship repairs, he began fabricating tiny filaments. Each one was thinner than a hair, flexible but strong. He tested each one carefully, making sure they could conduct electricity without overheating. These are going to be the bypass routes, he explained to Ralthan. I will insert them into specific scales, creating artificial connections between healthy neural nodes. When we activate the power cell, the electricity should flow through these new pathways instead of overloading her damaged sections. You will put wires into her body? Ralthan looked uncertain. Temporary ones, Roy assured him. If this works, her own system should heal and take over. Then we can remove them. If it does not work. He did not finish the sentence. Word of what was happening had spread through the small settlement. More people began arriving at the workshop. Some brought medical supplies salvaged from the settlement's limited clinic. Others brought food and water for Ralthan, who refused to leave Shira's side. A few of the settlement's children stood outside the workshop windows watching with solemn faces. Finally, everything was ready. Beth had the power cell connected and calibrated. Walter had mapped 17 different insertion points where Roy needed to place the filaments. Lily had everything sterilized and organized on a tray beside the table. Roy picked up the first filament with a pair of precision tweezers. His hands were steady despite the pressure. He had done delicate work before, repairing circuit boards and nanoscale ship components. But those had been machines. This was a living being. Ralthan, I need you to hold her steady, Roy said quietly. This is going to hurt even though she is unconscious. Her body might react. The big Draenir positioned himself at Shira's head, his hands gentle but firm on her shoulders. Roy located the first insertion point, a scale near her spine that still held a faint glow. He took a breath and carefully slid the filament into the tiny gap between scales. Shira's body twitched. A low sound came from her throat, something between a moan and a hiss. Ralthan whispered to her in their own language, words that sounded like comfort and apology mixed together. Roy continued working. Each filament had to be placed exactly right, threading through the gaps between scales to connect with the neural tissue beneath. It was painstaking work. His prosthetic arm, normally a disadvantage in delicate tasks, actually helped. It did not shake or tire. Lily assisted, handing him tools and wiping away the thin bioluminescent fluid that leaked from the insertion points. Walter watched the holographic display, confirming each placement. Beth monitored Shira's bioelectric field, watching for any sign of change. 15 done, Roy muttered. 2 more. The 16th filament went in smoothly. The 17th was trickier. It had to reach a deep cluster of scales near her chest, close to where the original injury had been. Roy had to work by feel as much as sight, threading the wire carefully through the layers. Got it, he finally said. He stepped back and flexed his hands. Beth, are we ready? Power cell is charged and standing by. I have set it to start at 10% and ramp up slowly. You will have manual control to adjust as needed. Roy looked at the woman lying on his workbench. Shira's scales were almost completely dark now. Her breathing was so shallow it was barely visible. They were out of time. Ralthan, Roy said. Last chance to back out. The Draenor warrior shook his head. I trust you, Roy Davis. Do what must be done. Roy picked up the control unit Beth had rigged. It was a simple dial and a trigger switch. Nothing fancy. He positioned himself where he could see both Shira and the monitoring equipment. Starting at 10%, he announced. On 3, 1, on 2, 3. He pressed the trigger. The power cell hummed to life. Electricity flowed through the cables, into the filaments, into Shira's body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Shira's back arched off the table. Her scales flared with light, brighter than they had been since she arrived. Ralthan had to use all his strength to hold her down as her body convulsed. It is working, Walter shouted. The energy is flowing through the new pathways. But then something went wrong. The light in Shira's scales began to flicker wildly. The monitor started screaming alarms. Her body went rigid, then completely limp. She is flatlining, Beth yelled. Roy, shut it down. Roy's hand hovered over the controls, but he did not shut it down. His eyes were locked on one small cluster of scales near Shira's spine. There, just barely visible, a faint glow remained. She is not gone, he said. Part of the system is still holding charge. Lily, hand me the resonance hammer. Dad, what are you doing? Lily asked, but she grabbed the tool from the bench. It was a small hammer used for tuning the crystal components in ship engines. Roy took it and moved to Shira's side. He studied the scale pattern, the way the faint light pulsed weakly. Then he did something that looked completely insane. He tapped one of the glowing scales with the hammer. A clear, ringing tone filled the workshop. He tapped another scale. Another tone, slightly different. He continued, creating a rhythm, a pattern of sounds. Roy, have you lost your mind? Walter asked. The scales are resonant, Roy said, not stopping his work. They respond to vibration. I am trying to restart the cascade, but in reverse, one scale at a time. He kept tapping, adjusting the rhythm, finding the frequency that made each scale respond. It looked like madness. It looked like a mechanic who had finally cracked under pressure. Then one scale flickered brighter. Then another. Roy kept going, sweat running down his face, his prosthetic arm moving in perfect rhythm with his organic one. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike precise, each tone clear. The glow began to spread. Slowly at first, then faster. Like watching a wave flow backward, the light returned to Shira's scales. It spread from that one stubborn cluster near her spine, flowing outward along the pathways Roy had created with the filaments. Her chest heaved, once, twice. Then her eyes snapped open, glowing brilliant gold. She gasped a deep, shuddering breath, and the entire workshop erupted in cheers. Shira's eyes focused slowly, confusion written across her alien features. Her scales were still glowing, pulsing with light and rhythm with her heartbeat. The pattern was beautiful, hypnotic, like watching bioluminescent waves on a dark ocean. Ralthan was speaking to her in their language, his voice choked with emotion, and she turned her head toward him with obvious effort. Roy stepped back from the table, his legs suddenly feeling weak. The resonance hammer slipped from his fingers and clattered on the floor. He had done it. He had actually done it. A being that every doctor of her species said was unsavable was now breathing, looking around, alive. Beth caught him as he swayed. Easy there, miracle worker. When was the last time you ate? I have no idea, Roy admitted. The adrenaline was wearing off fast, leaving him shaky and exhausted. Walter was checking Shira's vital signs with the medical scanner, shaking his head in disbelief. Her bioelectric field is stabilizing. The cascade has not just stopped, it has reversed. Roy, do you understand what you have just done? This is impossible. Apparently not, Lily said with a grin. She was wiping tears from her eyes, not bothering to hide them. Shira spoke, her voice weak but clear. She was still speaking in the Draenor language, but Ralthan translated, his own voice thick with emotion. She asked what happened. The last thing she remembers is the raider attack. You were dying, Roy said gently. Your mate brought you here. We managed to stabilize you, but you are not out of danger yet. Those filaments I put in your scales are temporary. We need to keep you still for a while. Let your own system take over the energy regulation. Ralthan translated, and Shira's golden eyes fixed on Roy. She spoke again, and this time Ralthan's translation came with difficulty, as if he was fighting back tears. She says you are either the bravest person she has ever met or the craziest. Possibly both. Definitely both, Beth said with a laugh. The settlement's doctor, an older woman named Grace, arrived a few minutes later. She took one look at the scene and immediately began organizing proper medical care. Working with Walter, she set up monitoring equipment around Shira and established a proper recovery area in the corner of Roy's workshop. It was clear Shira could not be moved yet. Over the next several hours, people from the settlement kept arriving. They brought blankets, food, medical supplies, anything that might be useful. Many just wanted to see the alien who had come back from death and the mechanic who had saved her. Roy had to tell the story a dozen times, each telling making the whole thing seem more surreal. He left out the part where he had no idea what he was doing. He especially left out the moment when he thought it had failed completely. Some things did not need to be shared. By the time night fell, Shira was stable enough to sit up with support. Her scales had settled into a steady glow, much healthier looking than the flickering light from before. She could speak a little English, though her accent was even thicker than Ralthan's. "You fix broken things," she said to Roy, her voice raspy but growing stronger. "I was broken. You fixed me. This is... The Draenir have no word for it in your language. The closest translation is sacred debt. You do not owe me anything," Roy said. He was sitting on a stool near her recovery area, finally eating the sandwich someone had thrust into his hands. "I just did what anyone would do." Ralthan made a sound that might have been a laugh. "No, what you did no one has ever done. For 5,000 years my people have lost loved ones to Cascade Syndrome. We accepted it as the price of our biology. You, a human who has never seen my species before, cured it in one night with spare parts and stubbornness. And a lot of luck," Roy added. "Luck is what the unwise call skill they do not understand," Ralthan said. He performed a gesture, touching his forehead and then his chest. "I swear by the first flame you have saved the most precious thing in my world. Until this debt is repaid, I am your shield and your sword." Before Roy could protest that really was not necessary, Lily came running into the workshop, her tablet in hand. "Dad, you need to see this!" "Remember that merchant captain who was here this afternoon? The one who wanted to see Shira?" "Yeah, what about him?" "He posted about what happened on the trade network." Lily turned the tablet around. On the screen was a message board, and the post at the top was titled, "Human Mechanic Cures Uncurable Draenir Condition." It already had thousands of comments. Roy's stomach sank. "Oh no. Oh yes," Lily said, scrolling through the comments. "It is spreading across every trade route. People are calling you a miracle worker.
Some are calling you a fraud."
Either way, you are famous now, Dad." Over the next week, Shira's recovery continued to progress beyond anyone's expectations. Roy monitored the filaments daily, watching as her natural neural pathways slowly took over the energy distribution. The artificial bypasses were working exactly as he had hoped, giving her body time to heal itself. But Shira's recovery was not the only thing happening in Dusthaven. The story was spreading faster than a solar wind. By the third day, Roy received his first message from another alien species, asking if he could help with a similar bioelectric condition. By the fifth day, he had 20 messages. By the seventh day, ships were arriving. The first was a vole, a crystalline being whose species was silicon-based rather than carbon-based. Their body was fracturing, cracks spreading through their structure in a pattern eerily similar to the Cascade Roy had seen in Shira. They had traveled 3 systems to reach Dusthaven. "I do not know anything about silicon-based biology," Roy protested when the vole was brought to his workshop. "You knew nothing about Draenir biology either," Walter pointed out. The old xenobiologist had barely left the workshop since Shira's recovery, fascinated by the new field Roy had accidentally created. "But you understood the principle. Energy needs pathways. Structure needs support. Those concepts work across different biologies." Roy examined the vole with his scanner. Sure enough, the fractures were spreading in a cascade pattern. The vole's body was not just breaking, it was conducting energy poorly, and the degradation was accelerating. With Walter's help and the vole's own knowledge of their physiology, Roy developed a treatment. Instead of conductive filaments, he used a crystalline matrix compound, creating artificial lattice points to support the damaged areas. It worked. Not perfectly, not immediately, but it worked. The next patient was a whisperer, a gaseous being whose containment suit was failing. The suit was not just a container but part of their biology, grown over decades. When Roy realized the suit's failure was causing their gaseous form to lose coherence, he worked with Beth to create a temporary electromagnetic field that could hold them together while they regrew their natural containment. Word spread further. More aliens came. Each case was different. Each required innovation and adaptation. Roy started working 18-hour days, barely sleeping. Lily helped, learning faster than Roy would have thought possible. Beth became his right hand for anything involving energy systems. Walter provided the biological knowledge, studying each new species with the excitement of someone who had found a new purpose in his old age. Ralthan and Shira remained at Dust Haven, despite Shira being fully recovered by the second week. The filaments had been removed carefully one by one, and her neural network had taken over completely. She was healthy, strong, and according to Grace's scans, showed no signs of the cascade returning. "We cannot leave," Ralthan explained to Roy one evening. They were sitting outside the workshop watching the sunset paint the canyon walls red and gold. "The debt remains unpaid. You have helped me with every patient who has come through," Roy said. "You have shared your knowledge, your experience. I would say we are even." "You do not understand," Shira said. She was sitting beside Ralthan, her scales shimmering in the fading light. "Among our people, a life debt is sacred. We owe you not just gratitude but service. Until we have saved your life as you saved mine, or until we have given you something of equal value, we cannot consider the debt settled." "I do not need my life saved," Roy said, "and I do not need anything else." "Then we will stay until you do," Ralthan said simply. 3 weeks after Shira's recovery, Roy received a message that changed everything. It was from the Draenir High Council, the ruling body of Ralthan and Shira's entire species. The message was formal, written in carefully translated English, and it requested Roy's presence on their homeworld. "They want to meet you," Ralthan said when Roy showed him the message. "The Council has heard what you did. Some believe you have discovered a true cure for Cascade Syndrome. Others think Shira's recovery was a single lucky incident. They want proof." "Proof?" Roy looked at the message again. "What kind of proof?" "They have a patient," Shira said quietly. "A young warrior named Kale. He is in late-stage Cascade. If you can save him, the Council will accept that your method works. If you cannot, then they will call me a fraud," Roy finished. "And everyone who has come here seeking help will lose hope." "It is a test," Ralthan admitted, "and it is not fair. But the Council is old, traditional. They do not trust easily, especially not outsiders. You would be working in an unfamiliar place with their equipment under their observation." Roy thought about it for a long moment. He thought about Shira lying on his workbench, more dead than alive. He thought about the Foal, the Whisperer, the dozen other beings he had helped in the past weeks. He thought about all the messages he had received from people desperate for help, for hope. "When do they want me there?" he asked. "As soon as possible," Ralthan said. "Kale has days at most." Roy nodded slowly. "Then I guess we better get moving."
"Lily Beth!"
"Pack your tools. We are taking a trip." Lily appeared in the doorway of the workshop, grease on her cheek and excitement in her eyes. "Seriously? We are going to the Draenir homeworld?" "Apparently," Roy said. He stood up and stretched, feeling the weight of what he was about to attempt. "Though I have got no idea if I can actually pull this off twice." "You will," Shira said with certainty. "Because you do not see impossible. You only see problems waiting for solutions." Roy wished he had her confidence. But as he looked around at the workshop, at the people who had become his team, at the aliens who had traveled across the stars seeking his help, he realized something. Maybe confidence did not matter. Maybe what mattered was being willing to try when everyone else had given up. "All right then," he said. "Let us go prove it was not just luck." The journey to Kelvar Prime took 6 days through hyperspace, traveling in a proper Draenir medical transport that the Council had sent for them. Roy spent most of the trip studying everything he could about Draenir physiology, reviewing the data from Shira's treatment, and trying not to think about the fact that he was about to perform a medical procedure in front of the most important people of an entire alien civilization. Lily was less nervous and more excited. She spent her time exploring every inch of the ship, asking the Draenir crew endless questions about their technology. Beth focused on understanding the Draenor power systems, knowing they might need to adapt their equipment to work with alien infrastructure. When the ship finally dropped out of hyperspace, Roy got his first look at Kelvar Prime through the observation window. The planet was beautiful in a harsh way, all red deserts and towering crystal formations that caught the light of their sun and threw it back in rainbow patterns. Cities rose from the desert like geometric gardens, their buildings designed to work with the heat rather than fight against it. The ship landed at the capital city's main spaceport. As the boarding ramp lowered, Roy felt the heat hit him like a physical wall. The air was dry and scorching, making his lungs burn with each breath. He understood immediately why the Draenor had developed scales. This environment would kill an unprotected human in hours. A delegation was waiting for them. 6 Draenor in formal robes, their scales decorated with official-looking patterns. At the front stood an ancient female, her scales so pale they were almost white, but her golden eyes were sharp and alert. This had to be Matriarch Sarah, the leader of the High Council. Ralthan and Shira immediately performed a complex gesture of respect, touching forehead, chest, and ground. Roy, Lily, and Beth bowed awkwardly, not sure of the proper protocol. Roy Davis, the matriarch said. Her English was perfect with barely any accent. You have caused quite a disturbance in our carefully ordered world. That was not my intention, matriarch, Roy said carefully. No, I suspect it was not. Her eyes studied him with an intensity that made Roy feel like he was being scanned down to his atoms. You are shorter than I expected, and you look tired. Long trip, Roy admitted. Something that might have been amusement flickered across the matriarch's face. Come, Kale does not have time for ceremony, and neither do you. They were taken to the Council Medical Center, a massive building of white stone and crystal. Inside, the temperature was cooler, regulated for comfort. They passed through halls filled with Draenor physicians, all of whom stopped to stare at the humans walking past. Roy heard whispers in their language, caught glimpses of skepticism and curiosity in equal measure. Kale was in a private room, lying on a platform similar to the table Roy had used for Shira. He was young, probably the equivalent of a human in their early 20s. His scales were a deep green that reminded Roy of earth forests, but like Shira had been, the color was fading. The cascade was well advanced. More than half his scales had already gone dark. Beside him stood an older Draenor female, her hands clasped tightly. Kale's mother, Roy guessed. Her eyes were full of grief and desperate hope. This is the human? She asked the matriarch. This is the one who saved the off-worlder? I am Roy Davis, Roy said gently, and I am going to do everything I can for your son. He approached Kale, who was conscious but barely. The young Draenor's eyes tracked him weakly. Roy pulled out his scanner, the same one he had used on Shira, and began the examination. Behind him, the room filled with people. Council members, physicians, observers. He tried to ignore them and focus on the readings. The cascade pattern was similar to Shira's but more advanced. The neural degradation had spread further, affecting more critical systems, but the underlying principle was the same. Energy flowing down failing pathways, each failure cascading into the next. Can you help him? The mother asked. Roy looked at the readings for a long moment. This was worse than Shira's case. Much worse. If he had tried his technique on Shira at this stage, it might not have worked. But he had learned things since then, refined his understanding. The question was whether he had learned enough. I need to examine the facility, Roy said. See what equipment you have available. And I need time with your medical database to understand the specific variations in Kale's neural structure compared to Shira's. One of the council members, a stern-looking male with dark blue scales, spoke up. You have 6 hours. After that, we require you to begin the procedure, successful or not. We will not let you delay indefinitely to avoid failure. That is fair, Roy said, though 6 hours was barely enough time. Can my team and I use a workspace? They were given access to a medical lab adjacent to Kale's room. Roy, Lily, and Beth immediately began working. Walter had remained on Dusthaven due to his age, but he was on constant communication link, offering advice and information. The Draenor medical technology was advanced, far beyond what Roy had available in his workshop, but it was also inflexible, designed for Draenor biology and Draenor medical theory. None of it was made for what Roy needed to do. We will have to adapt our own equipment, Beth said after examining their power systems. Their energy regulators are not precise enough for what you need. Can you make it work in 6 hours? Roy asked. 5 hours, Beth corrected. You need at least an hour to prep Cale himself, but yes, I can do it. Lily was studying Cale's medical scans, comparing them to the records from Shira's treatment. Dad, look at this. His cascade started in a different place than Shira's did. The origin point is near his brain cluster, not his chest. That changes the whole pathway map. Roy looked at the comparison. She was right. If he used the same insertion points he had used on Shira, he would miss the critical pathways entirely. He needed to recalculate everything. Outside the lab, he could see Draenir physicians watching through the windows. Some looked hopeful. Many looked skeptical. A few looked outright hostile. He understood their feelings. He was an outsider, a human, someone from a species that had barely started exploring the stars compared to the Draenir's ancient civilization. The idea that he could solve a problem that had plagued them for millennia must seem arrogant, even insulting. The 6 hours passed faster than Roy would have liked. He managed to map out 17 new insertion points, optimized for Kyle's specific cascade pattern. Beth finished adapting their power cell to work with the Draenir power grid. Lily sterilized and prepared all their tools, working with practiced efficiency. When the time came, the council assembled in Cale's room. All 12 members were present, along with the head physicians and dozens of observers. A camera was set up to broadcast the procedure across the planet. No pressure at all, Roy thought grimly. Cale's mother stood beside her son, holding his hand. She looked at Roy with eyes that held every emotion at once: hope, fear, desperation, and doubt. Before you begin, the matriarch said, I must make the situation clear. If you succeed, you will have proven your method works. The council will acknowledge your achievement and offer our support. But if you fail, if Cale dies during this procedure, you will be held responsible. Your reputation will be destroyed. No one will trust your techniques. Do you understand? Roy met her eyes steadily. I understand. But matriarch, with respect, Cale is already dying. If I do nothing, he dies anyway. At least this way he has a chance. A chance based on unproven alien techniques, one of the physicians said scornfully. A chance that worked once before, Shira said from the doorway. She had not been invited to observe, but she pushed into the room anyway, Ralthan behind her. I was as far gone as Cale is now. This human saved me when every Draenir doctor said I was beyond help. You call his methods unproven, but I am proof they work. One success does not make a cure, the physician retorted. Then let him have a second success, Ralthan said. His hand was on his weapon, a clear signal that he would tolerate no interference. The matriarch raised a hand for silence. Enough. Roy Davis, proceed. Prove your methods or fail, but do it now. Roy nodded and turned to Cale. The young Draenir was looking at him with barely focused eyes. Roy leaned close and spoke quietly so only Cale could hear. I know you are scared. I know you have been told this is impossible. But I do not believe in impossible. I believe in solving problems one step at a time. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to give your body a new path for the energy to flow. We are going to bypass the damaged sections. And we are going to bring you back. You just have to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? Cale's response was barely a whisper. I will try. That is all I need, Roy said. He stepped back and looked at his team. Beth was ready at the power controls. Lily had the filaments prepared on a sterilized tray. They had done this before. They could do it again. Roy picked up the first filament with his precision tweezers. His hands were steady. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of medical equipment. He began inserting the filaments one by one, each placement precise and deliberate. Cale's body twitched with each insertion, but his mother held him steady, whispering encouragement in their language. The 7th filament was the problem. Roy had to place it deep, threading it through multiple scale layers to reach a critical neural cluster near Cale's spine. His hands worked by feel as much as sight, and he could feel every eye in the room watching him, judging him. The filament slipped, just slightly, but enough. Roy's heart jumped, but his hands did not waver. He adjusted, found the right angle again, and continued. The filament slid home. 12 more to go. Roy worked steadily, blocking out everything except the patient in front of him and the task at hand. Lily assisted perfectly, anticipating what he needed before he asked. Beth monitored Kale's bioelectric field, calling out readings at regular intervals. 17 in place, Roy finally said. Beth, power cell status? Charged and ready. Settings match what we used for Shira. Adjusted for Kale's mass and neural density. Roy looked at Kale's mother. This is the dangerous part. When we activate the power cell, his body is going to react strongly. It might look bad, but that is the treatment working. Please trust me, she nodded, unable to speak. Roy picked up the control unit. His thumb hovered over the trigger. This was it. Success or failure, validation or destruction. But more importantly than any of that, this was a young life hanging in the balance. Starting at 10%, Roy announced. Activating in 3, 2, 1. He pressed the trigger. The power cell hummed. Electricity flowed through the filaments into Kale's body. And immediately Roy knew something was wrong. Kale's scales lit up, but the pattern was wrong. Instead of the steady glow Roy had seen with Shira, the light was chaotic, flickering in random patches. The bioelectric readings on the monitor spiked erratically. Kale's body convulsed harder than Shira's had, his back arching off the platform. Power levels are unstable, Beth called out. The energy is not following the pathways. Roy's mind raced. What was different? The filaments were placed correctly. The power cell was calibrated. But something about Kale's neural structure was not responding the same way Shira's had. He stared at the monitor, watching the chaotic energy patterns, and suddenly understood. It is the resonance, he said. Every Draenir has a unique bioelectric frequency. I tuned the treatment to match Shira's frequency, but Kale's is different. Can you adjust it? Lily asked urgently. Not with the equipment we have, Roy said. The monitors were screaming alarms now. Kale's mother was crying out in their language, and the council members were shouting. I need to find his specific frequency and match the energy flow to it, or his nervous system will tear itself apart. One of the Draenir physicians moved forward. Stop this. You are killing him. He was already dying, Roy shot back. Beth, hold the power at this level. Do not increase, do not decrease. Just hold it steady. He looked around the room desperately, searching for something, anything that could help him identify Kale's unique frequency. His eyes landed on something in the corner. A traditional Draenir musical instrument, like a combination of a harp and a bell displayed as decoration. That instrument, Roy said, pointing. How does it work? The matriarch looked surprised by the question. It resonates with the player's bioelectric field. Each Draenir produces a unique harmonic pattern. Why does this matter? Because I need to match Kale's frequency. Roy turned to Ralthan. Can you play that instrument? I can, but play the pattern that matches Kale's bioelectric signature. His unique harmonic. Can you do that? Understanding dawned in Ralthan's eyes. He moved to the instrument and positioned his hands over it. The instrument responded to his touch, producing a complex series of tones. But these were Ralthan's tones, not Kale's. His mother should do it, Shira said suddenly. Family members share similar bass frequencies. She will be closer to his true signature than anyone else. Kale's mother looked confused, but she moved to the instrument. Her hands trembled as she touched it. The tones that emerged were different from Ralthan's, higher and more complex. Roy listened intently, his engineer's mind analyzing the patterns. He could hear the bass frequency, the harmonics, the unique signature of her bioelectric field. It would be similar to Kale's, but not exact. Lily, he said quickly, in my toolkit there is a frequency analyzer, the one I use for crystal tuning. Get it. Lily ran and returned in seconds with the device. Roy activated it, holding it near the instrument as Kale's mother played. The analyzer displayed the frequency pattern in visual form, breaking it down into component wavelengths. Now, Roy said to the mother, think about your son. Focus on him. Your bioelectric field changes based on emotion and thought. If you focus on Kale, your frequency should shift closer to his. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, and continued playing. The tones shifted, becoming slightly different. The analyzer showed the change. Roy watched the patterns evolve, comparing them to Kale's bioelectric readings on the medical monitor. There. A correlation. Not perfect, but close enough to work with. Beth, I am sending you a frequency pattern. Adjust the power cell output to match this harmonic. Beth's fingers flew over the controls. Matching. Matching. Got it. Ready to apply. Do it, Roy ordered. The power cell's hum changed, rising and falling in a pattern that matched the tones from the instrument. The energy flowing into Kale shifted from chaotic to structured, following the new harmonic pattern. Kale's convulsions eased. The random flickering in his scales began to organize into waves. The monitor alarms quieted as his bioelectric field stabilized. It is working. Walter's voice came through the communication link from Dust Haven. He was monitoring everything remotely. The cascade is reversing. Roy, you did it! But Roy was not celebrating yet. The energy flow was better, but it was not perfect. Kyle's scales were still showing dark patches, areas where the cascade had done too much damage. The filaments were bypassing the damaged sections, but the energy was not distributing evenly. He grabbed the resonance hammer, the same tool he had used to restart Shira's system. But when he tapped one of Kale's scales, the tone was wrong. It did not resonate the same way Shira's had. Why is it different? Roy muttered to himself. Because he is male, one of the Draenor physicians said. She had been watching quietly, and now she stepped forward. Female Draenor scales resonate at higher frequencies than males. You need a different approach. Roy looked at her gratefully. What would work better? The physician hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Lower frequencies require more sustained vibration. Not tapping, but steady pressure with oscillation. She picked up a medical tool from a nearby tray. This is a bone regenerator. It produces controlled vibration. It might work. She handed him the tool. Roy examined it quickly. It was similar to tools he had used in his workshop for breaking up crystalline deposits in fuel lines. He could work with this. Thank you, he said simply. He activated the bone regenerator and carefully applied it to one of the dark scale patches on Kale's chest. The tool vibrated at a low frequency, and slowly the scale began to glow. Not brightly, but it was responding. Roy worked systematically, moving from one damaged area to another, using the vibration to stimulate the scales back to life. Kale's mother continued playing the instrument, maintaining the harmonic frequency. Beth held the power cell steady. Lily monitored Kale's vital signs. The Draenor physician who had helped began pointing out which areas needed the most attention. The room had changed. What had started as a test, a challenge, had become something else. The physicians were no longer watching skeptically. They were helping, offering advice, pointing out anatomical details Roy would not have known. The council members had gone quiet, witnessing something they had thought impossible. An hour passed, then two. Roy's arms ached from holding the vibration tool steady, but he did not stop. Slowly, steadily, Kale's scales brightened. The dark patches shrank. His breathing became stronger and more regular. Finally, Roy stepped back. Every scale on Kyle's body was glowing, not as brightly as a healthy Draenor, but alive, active, functional. Beth, start reducing power by 5% every minute, Roy said. We need to let his system take over gradually. As the power cell output decreased, everyone watched the monitors tensely. If Kale's neural network could not maintain the energy flow on its own, the cascade would return. This was the real test. The minutes crawled by. 10% power, 8%, 5%. Kale's bioelectric field remained stable. His scales continued glowing under their own power. 2%, Beth announced. 1%, 0. The power cell shut off. The filaments were now just passive conductors. All the energy flowing through Kale's neural network was his own. His scales pulsed steadily in rhythm with his heartbeat. His eyes opened, focusing on the ceiling, then on his mother's face. He spoke, his voice weak but clear in the Draenor language. His mother sobbed and responded, holding his hand tightly. Around the room, Draenor were touching their foreheads and chests. A gesture Roy had learned was a sign of respect and awe. The matriarch stepped forward. She studied Kale for a long moment, then looked at Roy. You have done what our best physicians could not. What our ancient knowledge said was impossible. She paused, and Roy saw something like humility in her ancient eyes. This is difficult for us to accept. We are an old race, proud of our knowledge. To have an outsider, a young species, teach us something so fundamental about our own biology, it is humbling. I did not teach you anything, Roy said quietly. I just saw the problem from a different angle. Your physicians have knowledge I cannot match, but sometimes fresh eyes help. And sometimes the answer is not in medical science. Sometimes it is in engineering. One of the physicians, the one who had helped with the bone regenerator, spoke up. You said each drainer has a unique frequency, that the treatment must be tuned to the individual. This is true? Based on what I have seen, yes, Roy confirmed. Then this cannot be a standardized treatment, another physician said. It requires analysis, customization, real-time adjustment. It requires expertise that few have. It requires people willing to learn, Roy countered. I am not special. I am just a mechanic who pays attention. Anyone can learn what I know. I will teach whoever wants to learn. The room fell silent. The matriarch looked around at the council members, at the physicians, at Kyle lying alive on the platform when he should have been dead. She looked at Roy, at Lily, at Beth, at the human team that had crossed the stars to help someone they had never met. You offer to share this knowledge freely? The matriarch asked. You ask nothing in return? Roy thought about it. Actually, I do want something. I want your physicians to work with my team. Share your biological knowledge while we share our engineering approach. Together, maybe we can help even more species who fall into the gap between medicine and mechanics. The matriarch's expression changed. What had been humility became something like respect. You seek not to profit from this gift, but to amplify it through cooperation. My wife died of a disease I could not cure, Roy said quietly. I could not save her. But maybe together your people and mine can save others. That is worth more than any payment. The matriarch touched her forehead, then her chest, then extended both hands to Roy. It was the highest gesture of respect in Draenor culture, usually reserved for heroes and honored dead. Roy awkwardly copied the gesture, not sure if he was doing it right. Roy Davis, the matriarch said formally. On behalf of the Draenor High Council and all our people, I acknowledge the sacred debt we now owe to you and your species. You have given us hope where we had none. You have saved lives we thought lost. You have shown us that wisdom comes in many forms, from many places. She turned to address the room, speaking in both English and her own language. Let it be known across all Draenor worlds. The human Roy Davis is declared Flamekeeper, a friend to our people in perpetuity. His techniques will be studied, his methods taught, and his name honored. And to any who doubt the value of cooperation with younger species, let them look at Kale, alive and healing, and reconsider their prejudice. The room erupted in response. The Draenor made a sound like humming mixed with clicking, which Roy learned later was their version of applause. The physicians were already gathering around Kale, examining him, discussing the treatment details with excitement. Lily was grinning widely. Beth was wiping tears from her eyes, and Roy felt the weight of the last few days finally settling on his shoulders. He had done it. Kale would live. The method was proven, but more than that, something bigger had happened. A door had opened between species. A partnership had formed, and the impossible had become possible once again. 5 years had passed since that day in the Council Medical Center. Roy stood in what used to be his small repair workshop on Dusthaven and barely recognized it anymore. The original building was still there, but it had grown like a living thing, expanding outward with new wings and facilities. What had been a simple mechanics shop was now the Cross-Species Medical Institute, and it served patients from across 36 different star systems. The growth had been gradual, but unstoppable. After Roy returned from Kelvar Prime, the Draenor Council had kept their promise. They sent physicians to study his methods. They provided funding for equipment and facilities. But more importantly, they spread the word about what Roy and his team had accomplished. Other species took notice. The Vole, whose crystalline patient Roy had helped, sent their own medical experts. The Whisperers established a permanent liaison. Species Roy had never heard of sent representatives. Each brought their own biological knowledge, their own medical challenges, their own perspectives. And slowly, beautifully, something new emerged. Not human medicine, not Draenor medicine, something hybrid, something that drew from dozens of different approaches and ways of thinking. Biomechanical medicine, they called it officially, but Roy preferred a simpler term, fixing what was broken, whatever form it took. Roy walked through the main facility, nodding to the people he passed. There was Dr. Lisa, a Draenor physician who had become the Institute's lead specialist in neural scale disorders. She was teaching a class to a mixed group of students, human and alien alike. Across the hall, Beth was working with a team of engineers from 6 different species. designing new tools that could work across multiple biological types. In what had been Roy's original workshop, now preserved as a teaching space, Lily was demonstrating the filament insertion technique to a group of apprentices. She was 21 now, no longer the enthusiastic teenager who had helped save Shira. She had grown into a brilliant biomechanical physician in her own right, with a gift for seeing connections between disparate systems that even Roy sometimes missed. Roy continued to his own office, a small room that he had insisted remained modest despite offers to give him something grander. Inside, Walter was waiting. The old xenobiologist was even older now, his hair completely white and his movements slower, but his mind was as sharp as ever. "Got a message for you," Walter said, holding out a data pad. "From Earth. The Medical Council wants you to establish a sister institute there. Full funding, full support, your choice of location." Roy took the pad and skimmed the message. It was tempting. Earth was home, even though he had not been back in 30 years. But he shook his head. "Not yet. We are still learning here. Once we have enough trained people to spread out, then we can think about expansion. You know there are already 3 unauthorized institutes claiming to use your methods, right?" Walter said. 2 on Earth, 1 on the Mars colony. "Are they helping people?" Roy asked. "According to reports, yes. Not as effectively as here, but they are trying." "Then that is what matters," Roy said. "I never wanted to own this. I wanted it to spread." A chime sounded at his door. Roy called out permission to enter, and Ralphin ducked through the doorway. The big Draenir had to be careful in buildings designed for human proportions, even though the institute had been modified to accommodate larger species. "Thought I would find you hiding in here," Ralphin said, with what Roy had learned to recognize as amusement. "You have a visitor. She is waiting in the main reception." "Who?" Roy asked. "She said her name is Dr. Patricia Cole. Human. From some place called Johns Hopkins University on Earth." Roy's eyebrows rose. Johns Hopkins was one of Earth's most prestigious medical institutions. "What does she want?" "To talk to you about your methods, apparently." "But Roy..." Ralphin's expression became serious. "She brought someone with her. A patient, human, young, I think maybe 10 years old. The child is very sick." Roy's stomach tightened. He had treated hundreds of patients over the past 5 years from dozens of species, but he had seen very few human patients. Most human medical conditions were well understood by human medicine. If someone from Johns Hopkins had brought a child across the stars to see him, it meant conventional medicine had failed. He found Dr. Cole in the reception area, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen too much suffering. Beside her sat a young girl in a wheelchair, thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. The girl's mother stood behind the wheelchair, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Dr. Davis?" Cole stood and extended her hand. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment." "Just Roy, please," he said, shaking her hand. "And we do not turn away people who need help." "What can I do for you?" Cole gestured to the girl. "This is Mia. She has a condition we have been calling cascade neural disorder, progressive degradation of neural pathways, causing increasing paralysis and sensory loss. It is always fatal, usually within a year of onset. Mia has had it for 8 months. Roy knelt beside the wheelchair, so he was eye level with Mia. "Hello, Mia. I am Roy." "You fixed the dragon lady," Mia said. Her voice was weak but curious. "My mom showed me the videos. Is it true you use spaceship parts?" Roy smiled. "The dragon lady is called Shira, and yes, I did use some equipment meant for ships. Sometimes the best tool for a job is the one nobody expects." "Can you fix me?" Mia asked. The question was direct, honest, without any false hope or desperation. Just a child asking a question. "I do not know yet," Roy answered honestly. "But I would like to try. Is that okay?" Mia nodded. Her mother squeezed her shoulder gently, not speaking but clearly fighting back tears. Roy stood and looked at Dr. Cole. "You think her condition is similar to Draenir Cascade Syndrome?" "The progression is nearly identical," Cole confirmed. "Neural pathways shutting down in sequence causing system-wide failure. When I read about your work with the Draenir, the similarities were impossible to ignore. If your technique works across species, maybe it works on humans too," Roy finished. He thought about it. The principle was the same, bioelectric systems failing in cascade. But human neural structure was different from Draenir scale networks. different from Vol crystal matrices, different from every species he had treated. I need to examine her, Roy said. Run full diagnostics, study the progression pattern. I cannot promise anything, Dr. Cole. This might not work. I know, Cole said quietly, but you are the only person who has ever reversed a condition like this. You are her only chance. Over the next 3 days, Roy and his team studied Mia's condition exhaustively. They brought in every specialist at the Institute, comparing her neural degradation to similar conditions in other species. Lily worked with Dr. Lisa to map the failing pathways. Beth analyzed the bioelectric patterns. Walter cross-referenced every bit of data they had on cascade-type conditions. The conclusion was both encouraging and terrifying. Yes, the condition was similar to what Roy had treated before. Yes, the same basic principles should apply. But the human nervous system was more complex than the Draenier neural scale network, more delicate, more vulnerable to mistakes. The margin for error is almost nothing, Lily said during one of their planning sessions. With the Draenier, the scales provide a buffer. With Mia, if we get the energy levels even slightly wrong, we could cause irreparable brain damage. So we do not get it wrong, Roy said simply. Dad, this is a child. A human child. If something goes wrong, then we will have tried, Roy interrupted gently. And that is what we do here. We try when everyone else has given up. Has anything changed about that? Lily looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. No, nothing has changed. The procedure was scheduled for the following day. Word spread through the Institute and through the settlement and across the communication networks. The human who had cured alien conditions was now attempting to cure a human. The symmetry was not lost on anyone. On the morning of the procedure, Roy found Mia in the patient preparation room sitting on the edge of the medical platform, swinging her legs. Her mother was with her and both looked scared but trying to be brave. Ready? Roy asked Mia. Will it hurt? She asked. Probably a little, Roy admitted. But we will do everything we can to make you comfortable. And when you wake up, hopefully you will feel better. Okay, Mia said. I trust you. The dragon lady said I could. Roy blinked. You talked to Shira. She visited me yesterday. She said you were scared when you fixed her too, but you did it anyway. She said being brave does not mean not being scared. It means doing things even when you are scared. Roy looked at Mia's mother, who nodded confirmation. Shira had apparently spent an hour with Mia the previous evening, talking about her own experience, offering comfort and hope. Shira is very wise, Roy said. Okay, let us get started. The procedure room was filled with people. Dr. Cole representing human medicine, Dr. Lisa representing Draenier expertise, Beth at the power controls, Lily managing the monitoring systems, Walter on remote link, Ralthan and Shira standing in the corner, silent observers and supporters. Roy had modified his technique for human physiology. Instead of inserting filaments between scales, he used neural interface threads, technology borrowed from cybernetic implants, to create temporary bypasses in Mia's spinal column and brainstem. The placement had to be precise down to the micrometer. The work took 4 hours. 4 hours of careful, delicate insertion, each thread guided by real-time imaging. Mia was under anesthesia, monitored by 3 different physicians. Her mother waited outside, supported by other parents from the settlement who had heard what was happening. Finally, all the threads were in place. Roy stepped back and looked at the readings. Everything looked correct, but theory and practice were different things. Power cell ready, Beth reported. Settings are at minimum safe threshold. Roy picked up the control unit. His hands were not shaking, but he was aware of every eye in the room on him. This was different from treating aliens. This was one of his own species, a child. The weight of it pressed down on him. Beginning activation, he said. Starting at 5% power. The power cell hummed. Energy flowed through the threads. Mia's body remained still, relaxed under anesthesia. The neural monitors showed activity increasing along the new pathways. It is working, Lily reported. Neural activity is following the bypasses. Increasing power to 10%. The progression continued. 15%. 20%. The failing pathways were being bypassed, energy flowing around the damaged sections just as Roy had planned. But then at 25%, the readings spiked. Neural activity is becoming chaotic, Dr. Lisa called out. She is not stabilizing. Roy stared at the monitors. This was not the same problem he had encountered with Kale. The energy was following the right pathways, but it was moving too fast, overwhelming the tissue. Then he understood. Human neurons fired faster than Drainer scales. The energy frequency was wrong, optimized for alien biology, not human. We need to adjust the pulse frequency, Roy said. Beth, can you modify the power cell output to a higher frequency pattern? How much higher? The frequency of human neural firing about... Roy did rapid calculations in his head. About 60 Hz base with harmonics at 240. That is not in the specifications. Beth protested. I know. Can you do it? Beth's hands flew over the controls. I can try. Give me 30 seconds. Those were the longest 30 seconds of Roy's life. Mia's neural activity was becoming more erratic. If it continued, they would have to shut down the procedure and hope she survived. Got it, Beth announced. New frequency ready. Applying now. The power cell's hum changed, rising in pitch. The energy flowing into Mia shifted pattern. And suddenly, like a lock clicking into place, her neural activity smoothed out. She is stabilizing, Dr. Cole said, disbelief in her voice. The cascade is reversing. Roy, it is working. Over the next hour, they slowly increased the power, watching as Mia's neural pathways healed, as the cascade reversed, as life and function returned to damaged sections. When they finally shut down the power cell and let her system take over on its own, her neural activity was stronger than it had been in months. Mia woke up slowly. Her eyes opened, focused on the ceiling, then on Roy's face. Did it work? She asked. Move your hand for me, Roy said gently. Mia lifted her right hand, the one that had been paralyzed for 2 months. She stared at it in wonder, then began to cry. Happy tears relieved tears. You fixed me, she whispered. You really fixed me. Her mother was brought in, and the reunion was something Roy would remember for the rest of his life. The sound of pure joy, pure relief, pure love. Dr. Cole pulled Roy aside afterward. You have to publish this. The technique, the modifications, everything. Human medicine needs this. It will be published, Roy assured her. Everything we learn here gets shared freely. That is the whole point. Over the following weeks, Mia's recovery continued to exceed all expectations.